We're doing it. Today is the day we're going to do a valve clearance, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So pay attention, get your notebooks out, and let's go. So what is a valve clearance check and adjustment? So when we're checking our valve clearances, basically all we're doing is checking the small gap between our cam lobe and our valve stem. It's essential this is correct, so it allows for proper thermal expansion. So during the heat cycle of our engine, the valves can still close and seal properly to allow for proper performance and compression. Obviously components wear over time, so that then changes the clearance. So that's why we have to go back in and adjust it every now and again. What can happen if you never do a valve check or adjustment? It will start off with basic performance issues. It might just be lagging a little bit. You can have slight tapping noise, which is where your valves aren't seating properly and there is slight knocking. It can be hard starting issues. Absolute worst case scenario, it can be complete engine failure due to piston and valve contact, and then smashing apart and costing you a lot of money. How often do you need to do this? It's different for every bike, obviously depending on the manufacturer. The best way to know for sure is to get a maintenance manual, etc., and that should tell you how often. On the CBRs, especially this year, it's about 16,000 miles. But if you do a lot of track days, you're better off doing it a bit more frequently. So what tools do you need? You're going to need a basic socket set, a 1/4 inch and 3/8 drive ratchet, preferably a 1/4 inch torque wrench that ranges from 5 to 25 Newton meters, a set of feeler gauges, a dead blow mallet, and if you have the OEM CCT, cam chain tensioner, you'll need the specified tool or the fabrication specs to fabricate the tool in order to lock out the cam chain tensioner. You can get around that with just a very small screwdriver and a lot of patience, but we'll get into that shortly. How long should this take? If you've done something like this before, then it's definitely doable in a day. It usually takes me about 6 to 7 hours. However, if this is your first time, it's probably a good idea to set aside a nice disturbance-free weekend, stick some tunes on and crack on, because you're probably going to be there a while. But like anything, once you've done it a couple of times, you'll be absolutely fine, and doing it in 5-6 hours shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so first thing you're going to have to do in order to do valve clearance is retract your cam chain tensioner. So this is an OEM one and it's spring loaded. Basically you can fabricate a key in order to lock this out. You can retract it and lock it out. It is possible to retract with a screwdriver like so, but the problem is retracting it with a screwdriver, you can't lock it. So on the fabrication one or the OEM tool you can buy from Honda, there is little tabs on it that allows you to lock it in place like that, so it doesn't then protrude further. Obviously, like I say, it is spring loaded, so as soon as you let go, it will just, there you go, like that. I don't have a OEM one anymore. I swapped mine out for a manual cam chain tensioner. The problem with them ones is the spring wears tension correctly anymore, and then you'll start getting a bit of slapping noise from your chain. So if you hear that, that's what it is. So we've got to retract our manual cam chain tensioner. We'll leave that like that. Job's good. Okay, so first things first, we're going to just have a good spray. We don't want any crap going into our engine. So the biggest struggle with doing a valve clearance is always going to be access to anything. And trying to record it is going to create that access even worse. It's about damn time. One down the middle here as well. Now we should be able to take all these off. Okay, we have our bolts out, and I always do them like this in a bit of cardboard, just so you know where everything goes. It can go back in its same place then. So from this angle, facing the bike, each bolt is in its corresponding place. That way we put everything back properly and where it's supposed to be. Okay, do not be surprised if this is somewhat, oh, I was about to say if this is stuck on. Sometimes you do have to give it a little whack with a rubber mallet. Okay, now best way to take this out I found was this way, I believe. But it has been a minute, so I might be wrong. Come on. There we go. Now we should be able to just slide it out this way. There we go. There we go. So this is one of the seals I want to replace. So this is the valve cover. Okay, so we are down to our valves. So something I want you guys to notice here is there's numbers on all of these. I'll try and zoom in for you so you can see. And that's for the torque sequence, okay? There you go, you can see on that one as well, hopefully. Get a better angle for you. And then to the right-hand side down there, this one is our timing chain. So right now you should be able to feel a little bit of slack in there. Here we have our intake cam along the front or closest to the rider, and then exhaust camshaft coming across. You'll notice this part on the side. So let me come down here. So this part here is for our cam position sensor. So intake, exhaust. So if you can see under them lobes, there's buckets there. So that's where the shims are, and that's what you need to get to if you need to replace any. Okay, now we've got to set up timing the engine. So we need to remove this cover. This is the crank bolt cover. So if we remove that, it's a 17mm nut. Okay, so there's a couple of things you might need to make note of here. So down the bottom here, that piece, that's your marker. On the actual crank itself, you have a marker this side, and then some writing up the top here. On the actual casing, you can see there's a slight notch here. So the first thing we need to do is get the engine top dead center on cylinder 1 compression stroke. Now you've got to be very careful when doing this. You want to make sure you're looking from the dead center point. Get down to eye level, because if you don't, it can look like it's timed and it's not. But a good way to be sure is to check your intake and exhaust cams. Now our engine's in time now, because the TCIF mark, the notch next to the T, has to be in line with this outer marking here on the crankcase. So there should be a parallel line straight across. And then the bottom notch should also line up as well. And then obviously the intake marking and the exhaust marking. That's engine in time. Okay, good job. We're ready to start checking valve clearances. Now there's a specific order of which valves to check every time we rotate the engine. So remember, each cylinder has 2 valves intake and 2 valves exhaust. So when we check these and we're turning the engine, we need to make sure the valves are closed when we're doing the actual check. We're going to check it in the order of cylinders 1 and 3 intake side. We're going to rotate the engine 180 degrees, and then we're going to check the exhaust cylinders 2 and 4, and then we're going to rotate it another 180 degrees, check its cylinders 2 and 4 intake, and then we're going to rotate it another 180 degrees and check exhaust 1 and 3. Okay, so we want to check cylinders 1 and 3 intake. So 2 cams lobes per cylinder. So intake 1 is here, intake 3 is here. So we're going to take our correct sized feeler gauges and find our tolerance. When we're doing this, it should have a slight drag to it. It shouldn't just go clean cut in and out. You definitely want a slight resistance. Not too much. If it's too much resistance, then that's not the correct feeler gauge. For intake cams, our tolerance is 0.17mm to 0.23mm. So I've got a 0.18, a 0.20 and a 0.23. So we'll go with the higher end first. You don't have to do the higher end first, but that's just what I'm doing. So that's a bit too tight. Let's go to a 0.18. There we go. So that slides in nicely. There's a bit of resistance, not too much. I would say that feels good. Just to confirm, we'll go one size bigger, 0.20, just Stick that in under the lobe. Yeah, that's tight. I could force it in, but that's not correct. So 0.18, I'm gonna say. So make sure we write this down. And then how about cam number 2? 0.18 feels too loose. 0.20 feels slightly too tight. So middle ground, 0.19 millimeter. Let's write it down. Okay, that's cylinder 1 done. Let's move on to cylinder 3. Same again. That feels literally perfect on them. We'll try a slightly higher. You never want to take just the first result, so always test one above, one below. I think we have the same situation again where a 0.18 is perfect. On the left-hand lobe, slightly too loose on the right hand. Yeah, and again, 0.20 doesn't really go in there. 0.18 slides in a bit too loose. So again, 0.18, 0.19. Okay, that's intake 1 and 3 done. Now we need to rotate the engine 180 degrees. This time, what we are looking for is that bottom marking down there at the bottom of the case. I don't know if you can see that on the actual, well, just below the bolt. There's a little notch. We want that to be at the 12 o'clock position. So 180 degrees, make sure that goes to the 12 o'clock position. You can just put a little bit of tape on the casing here to mark that 12 o'clock position if you wish. Okay, I'd say that's at the 12 o'clock mark. Time to do exhaust 2 and 4. Might be a bit harder for you to see this time as we are going on the other side, but it's exactly the same process. So we have cam lobes 2, 4 is going to be obviously on this side here and about here. So again, just count the lobes, 2 per cylinder. All right, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so that's cylinder 2 on this row. So cylinder 2 is right here for exhaust side. So there is a different tolerance for exhaust. Exhaust is always wider, the gap is always wider for the exhaust. And on this, it is 0.25 to 0.31 millimeter. Same again, we'll find our correct feeler gauges for that sort of range. And we'll go again. So feeler gauges, obviously they don't go in exact increments, so you kind of have to find a middle ground sometimes. So here we've got 0.25 millimeter, 0.28 millimeter, and 0.30 millimeter. Okay, so again, we'll check both the low and high end and see which one is closer. Oh, that's perfect. Perfect drag. And that is a 0.25. So it's definitely on the tighter side, but that's fine, not a problem. You can adjust them just to make the tolerances a bit closer, but that's personal choice. Obviously I do my checks quite often, so I'm not too worried about changing it right now. I'm happy with that. All right. Under this one. Okay, now I'm going to turn the engine 180 degrees again, and we've got to do 2 and 4 intake side this time. Okay, back to tolerances of 0.17 to 0.23. So we'll go back to our 0.18, 0.20 and 0.23 feeler gauges. And again, we're doing intake side 2 and 4. Okay, let's turn her again. Our last inspection is exhaust side 1 and 3. Let's do it. Okay, so you can see on there, maybe, I don't know, maybe the light's not very good. My recordings are done. I'm sure at some point I'll have to do this again, and I'm sure on the next one we will have to change some shims. So perhaps I'll do a guide on how to actually change them, depending on how this video does. We'll see. That's just a case of putting our cam chain tensioner back in and our valve cover back on and rebuilding the bike. I hope you found this video useful, and if you do attempt to do this yourself, leave a comment down below. I want to know how you get on. Thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.